Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Thank you for joining us on the program. As I mentioned in the open, a fascinating show. Just when you thought World War II stories have all been told, the Precipice Option reveals a yet untold story of the biggest rescue operation in the annals of World War II. 69 years later, a story still untold and brimming with controversy. The author is our guest on This Week in America, Alexander Kaufman, author of the book, The Precipice Option. Alexander, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is an amazing story, and before we actually get into the story, a story that I was not familiar with and fascinated as I was reading the book, The Precipice Option, let's talk about your background, which is fascinating. You were born a little before Hitler's ascent to power in Germany. Talk about the younger years that you spent there.
I came across the story hearing about a train. And the train that was actually in the middle of the war, and that's what amazed me and what amazed everybody else, of course, is that in the middle of the war there was a train with 684 people that was poised to go to Switzerland. While on the same platform, not far from there were 12,000 Jews deported every day from Budapest to Auschwitz. And I thought this, I wanted to know what is going on here. How is that possible? Not so much that they can sit in the train and be destined for Switzerland, but who is behind this? There must be a story behind this. Because even local German commanders, SS or whatever, just couldn't do this. It had to come from higher up. And so I started researching this, and some very interesting, odd things as part of events that happened in World War II and are still untold, came to light.
You know, it's interesting, and the book is called The Precipice Option. The website is the precipice-option.com. Information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us, where you can link directly onto the author's website, Alexander Kaufman, our guest on the program. This took, 5 years of research? I mean, the research you did was meticulous, and you literally spent 5 years of your life researching this. And I get the impression, as I'm reading through the book, this took different twists and turns. And I think amazed you in this whole process in putting this story together.
I tell you, the research spread, Rick, over such a wide area. I mean, I would say in Europe, I went to about 6-7 countries. And the interesting part was that I also hurried with the research because I still wanted to interview, if possible, some of the survivors of this tale. And indeed, years later, they weren't there anymore. But what I also found was that this incredible, unbelievable, totally unplanned, I mean, it just couldn't happen if you would ask anybody before, how this all happened, that the people who were involved actually knew very little about it. They really knew. Nobody asked what was the origin of that. How did it start? And I'll tell you how it started, if I have a minute.
Sure.
Himmler was at one time, decided after he attended many of the meetings with Hitler that he should replace Hitler for the good of the Reich, because he felt that Hitler was doing unbelievable damage to his country. He lost a quarter of his army in Kursk with the Russians. Then he made other mistakes. Every day he made another mistake, and he said, "I have to replace him." Now, there were many others who tried to replace Hitler who were caught. But here was the interesting part. Himmler could do it because Himmler was in charge of everything. Himmler was in charge of all the police. He was in charge of the SS. He was the interior minister because Hitler had full faith in him. So here what happens is, so he says, and that also showed me the introversion of the German hierarchy. We always consider them as so super efficient and know-it-all. Practically none of them spoke foreign languages. None of them traveled to any other countries, except the countries, of course, that they conquered. And therefore, they had certain perceptions in their mind of other people. One of them that we all know is, for instance, they couldn't understand how come the British, when they decided to, after they attacked, they took France and took Belgium and took Holland and all the other countries, and they couldn't understand how come the British give you such a fierce defense. They just didn't understand because they were not versed in the cultures and in the understanding of other countries. And so anyway, what came to what turned out, he said, look, the way I can do this, I can use, the idea came to him, I can use the Jews as a barter. In other words, he came up with an offer, and that offer was presented as a list. He needed a list. On the list were, here I have the list, he wanted 10,000 trucks, he wanted 200 tons of tea, imagine this, he wanted 800 tons of coffee, 2 million cases of soap, and an unspecified amount of tungsten, which he needed for the production of steel, of course. And he wanted this from the Allies, with the deal was that I will only use these materials against the Russians, and both the Allies and us should ally ourselves and go against the Russians. That was the main thing. Now, how do you convey this message? So he figured, look, we already killed 5 million Jews. We have 1 million left. I'll use this 1 million Jews as a barter. And how do I do this? I will apply, or I will appeal to the World Jewry Organization. And that's another interesting part. There's no such thing. This was a thing, this was a figment of the imagination of Goebbels. It was part of the propaganda that they fed and ate themselves too. And this was they started believing it. Now they went to the biggest remnant of Jews in Europe was in Hungary, because Hungary was an ally of the Germans, and the Germans only entered Hungary in March. As a matter of fact, it was March 1944. And that's the interesting part of it. So they entered there, and in the meantime, the Hungarian Jews set up a rescue committee to help Jews from Poland, from Slovakia, from all the other conquered area to save them. And they did. So anyway, now when the Germans came, they went to the rescue committee in Budapest, also to the Judenrat, which was the Jewish council, and they said to them, look, here is the list, and this is what we want from the Allies. Now everybody looked at the list and shook his head. They said, it's crazy. This is crazy.
Yes.
We are going to go to Eisenhower, we're going to go to Churchill, we're going to go to Roosevelt, and say to him, give us 10,000 trucks for the German army. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So rather than throw this away, there was one protagonist in the story, his name is Kastner. He said, 1 minute, I have an idea. You know what? We are now at the tail end of the war. We don't know how long this war is going to last, but it cannot last long. And indeed, it lasted another 15 months after that. So this whole tale is really something that happens in the last 15 months of the war. So I said, you know what? Let's make a charade out of it. Let's make them believe. They believe they have a list. They made up the list. They believe that they can get it. Let's help them. Let's help them believe it. Now we'll talk to the Allies. We'll make a mission. And we'll tell them that this is what we should do. Now, it was the first time, he said, that we have leverage. You see, when the Germans got into a town, and I'm talking World War II, of course, when they got into a country, they just took what they wanted. They didn't ask for it. Now, all of a sudden, there was a situation where they were asking for something. He said, okay, now you need something from us. So this is our leverage. Let's play this. So rather than say, this is crazy, this is nuts, it doesn't make any sense, he said, I'll tell you what, let's listen, let's make them believe that we're listening to it. and let's make believe that we are making contact. So now Himmler gave this down to Eichmann. We all know about Eichmann. Eichmann was the one in charge, went to Hungary, because Hungary still, as I said before, still had over 600,000 Jews left in intact shape. And he said, Eichmann went down to get him killed, to kill him off. That was his job, to deport and kill. And now Himmler gave him the list through another officer, gave him the list and said, okay, this is what we want, do what has to be done. So they organized, imagine this, they organized a German courier plane that was going to fly to Turkey with 2 or 3 of the Jewish leaders in Budapest with the list, because in Istanbul was an office of the Jewish Agency from Palestine in those days, and they figured this is the first contact. Now you guys go there, you contact them, and then you come back and tell us about it.
You're listening to, I want to mention the book just for a second. If you're just joining us, our guest on the program is Alexander Kaufman. The book he's talking about, it's a story that's really never been told. It's a fascinating story. It's called The Precipice Option. The website is the-precipice-option.com. An amazing story, and I didn't mean to interrupt there. Let's go back and pick up the story, because I'm fascinated by this. And again, I'm hearing it for the first time. We're 69 years after this happened, and hearing the story. The book is The Precipice Option. Alexander Kaufman, our guest. Information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link directly on. So, Alexander, let's go back and pick up the story at that point.
Yeah, well, so the mission went to Istanbul to make a first contact. Then they arranged a contact with the Allied headquarters in the Middle East, which at the time was in Cairo, because, as you know, the North African coast was already cleared, or was in the process of being cleared, but the Americans came from the west, from Morocco and from Algiers, and the British came from Libya and from Egypt and Libya. So the headquarters, the Middle East headquarters, the British even had a Middle East minister stationed there by the name of Lord Moyne. And so they went there. In the meantime, what happened? The thing got very complicated and very complex. The politicians in Palestine weren't too crazy about this idea. And not everybody took it on as a charade. They took it at face value. This is a mission from Europe. Himmler is going to let go 1 million Jews. And the 1 million Jews, where are they going to go? And then the protagonist, Kastner, who figured out that this is a leverage, right away told the Germans, I tell you what, I accept 1 million Jews. I accept the fact that I have a whole bunch of conditions. And one of the first conditions is you destroy Auschwitz. You destroy the ovens. You destroy everything. You stop killing. That's number one. Number two, you give me 1 million Jews. I cannot take them out right away. These are people that are lingering in camps. They're half dead. They're emaciated. They're hungry. They need medication. So I'll tell you what I want you to do. First, feed them, get food in there. Get medicine in there. And stop the brutal conditions that you put them in, and behave normally. And so to keep them alive and keep them, well, and then he said, look, let's face it, let's be practical about it. To transport 1 million people in peacetime, it's a task. That is something that needs quite an organization. Now you say we are in the middle of a war. How do you think we're going to transport 1 million people, even if they know where they're going? How is this possible? The logistics are not there. I mean, you can't do that. It doesn't make any sense. So therefore, I say to you, keep them where they are, but give them now good treatment. Give them all the advantages. Give them health, give them food, give them whatever they need. Treat the children properly and so forth. And so that was one thing. However, now came the thing. Of course, the emissaries who went to Istanbul and then on to Cairo, they also involved the leadership, the Jewish leadership, the politicians in Palestine. And there in Palestine, you had Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion was the one really responsible. I mean, he fought. He had a main objective. He was a very strong leader. He had a main objective in mind, and that was to establish a state. He said, after what I see is happening, it's even more urgent. We have to have a state where we can make the rules and we can say, yes, you can come into my borders. Yes, you can come in and settle here. Now, Ben Gurion, on the other hand, was also a practical leader. He was ruthless, but he was practical. And he said, look, I have to negotiate with the British. The British are holding the mandate. And if the British don't agree, my priority is to negotiate with the British. And therefore, that's the first thing we have to do. And let's do it according to my schedule and not from the side here. First of all, this million Jews business is not practical. It's not going to happen. It cannot happen. So why would I want to go to them and start bothering them and get them off the subject, the main subject that I want to discuss, that I'm discussing with them? Okay, so these were all kinds of political machinations. To make a long story short, to get him a little out of the way, the main emissary, his name is Brandt, was then all of a sudden on the way to Cairo. He was arrested by the British CID, by the British Secret Service. And the CID guys locked him up in Cairo. He got the best treatment in Cairo, but he wasn't free. And so he got stuck in Cairo, yet he wanted to go back to Eichmann, because first of all, he promised Eichmann he'll be back. He had other people there. He was afraid Eichmann is going to get on some kind of a revenge craze. And his family was there, his children were there, his wife was there, and now he's locked up. Now here was the thing. You couldn't let Eichmann know that he was locked up, because Eichmann was under the impression that he's out there negotiating for the list.
Interesting.
So this was this, you know, that there were layers and layers and layers of things. Now what happened to this whole story? Why did it take so long? And that's not the end of the story. So why it takes so long? Why was it so hard to even get this thing? Because people realized that certain information they didn't want to get out. They didn't want to get out their true feelings. They didn't want to get out certain things. So things started to be obfuscated. They started to cover them up. There were covers. And on top of the cover was another cover. And every time you asked, there was another cover. I mean, this thing became so complicated that, you know, rumors bred rumors. And one rumor brought about another rumor. And it was absolutely incredible. I mean, this is why it took 5 years to research this, to clean it up, to find where are the dogs buried.
Yeah, and when you talk about layer after layer as you're reading, it's like, wow, just when you think you sort of have a handle on this, there is another layer that comes up. The book is called The Precipice Option. The website is the-precipice-option.com. Alexander Kaufman, our guest on the program. Information, of course, at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. I got a couple minutes left in the program. I want to talk about Rudolf Kastner. You've mentioned him several times. Here's someone who was instrumental in saving over, 400,000 lives. A hero to some, a villain to others. He was assassinated. What is his role? How do you see him? Hero, villain?
Let me explain this. Look, Kastner, there was an SS colonel by the name of Becher, spelled B-E-C-H-E-R. Becher was one of the smart ones. Becher was supposedly loyal to Himmler. Himmler was his patron, and he was, of course, loyal to Germany and loyal to the SS and all these things. But in fact, he was loyal to one thing, and that was Becher. And he was smarter than all the other guys, because don't forget, what's interesting, what I felt that this was really a story of human nature. And the interesting part is that both the persecutors and the persecuted, they were more or less all the same age in this particular tale.
Yes.
And so that's interesting how they behaved and where they got all this. But Becher sidled up to Kastner, and he saw Kastner in a sense as an insurance policy till after the war, because he knew after the war, as an SS officer, as a high SS officer, it's not going to be so good. So he better have a piece of insurance and say that he helped people to be saved. Kastner knew that, Kastner understood it, and said, okay, if that's the deal, let's save people then, and you help me, because I cannot get along with Eichmann. Eichmann is impossible. Eichmann was a fanatic. Eichmann, money didn't matter to him. Nothing else mattered to him. He was a bureaucrat, and he was proud. On the trains he could run, and on the people he could put on the trains, and in the middle of bombardments, doesn't matter, he got his quota done. So he felt like an accomplished bureaucrat in a sense. It was impossible to talk to him any kind of sense. Also, he did not feel, he felt that Germany was losing the war, but he belonged to the cadre of people who said, we have a secret weapon. And wait till the Führer is going to unleash that weapon, and we are home free. I mean, the Allies are going to get it like they wouldn't believe. And so Becher, on the other hand, said, he didn't believe in that. He believed in more practical terms. He said, look, I will be out, they'll catch me, they'll arrest me, and then they'll hang me. And I need to get out of that. I need to be, saved also.
Alex, unfortunately, we're out of time, and we'll have Alex back to pick up the story. It's a true psychological thriller. It's a gamble of life and death. It's a book that's a story that's never been told before. It's interesting because in the back of the book, all the names that Alex had mentioned, those are all defined back there, and you can keep track of who's who in the situation as best you can. As I mentioned, this is layer after layer. The book is called The Precipice Option. His website is the-precipice-option.com. Alexander Kaufman, our guest on the program. You've done an excellent job with this, 5 years of extensive research. Would love to have you come back on the program and talk more about this and your early days in growing up in Germany. You saw quite a bit there. It's an excellent, but this would make a great movie. I got 30 seconds left. Any chance we'll see this on the big screen at some point?
Well, people are talking to me, but nothing has been finalized.
Well, I hope that happens. It's a story that needs to be told.
There's a lot of stories there. And there are some incredible stories. And I wanted to answer, if we have the time, I wanted to answer the question that you have. How could you save so many people?
Yes.
Well, Becher was one of the few officers who had a direct line to Himmler, because Himmler liked him. There was another reason for that. Himmler wanted to make his own SS independent from an economic point of view, which he started doing, of course. And so Becher was helping. Becher was sort of a business type. And so there was a day when they were about, the question was, next to Hamburg, south of Hamburg, was a big concentration camp called Bergen-Belsen. And Bergen-Belsen, the British came in from the west. The Germans were all mobilized on the right, deployed there with tanks and everything. And the camp was in the middle. And here are the inmates of that camp, over 100,000, sitting there, and they're going to be in the crossfire. So Becher happened to be with Kastner, and he was on the phone to Himmler. And he was talking. Then Kastner gives him a little kick in the foot and said to him, Becher, Kurt, tell Himmler to surrender the camp. So Becher, what? He says, tell him to surrender the camp. And here he paid his leverage again. He said, look, you want to talk to the Allies, right? You want to have them, you want to still save the Reich after Hitler. You want to do all this. This would give you a terrific reputation that you really did a humanitarian thing the first time in your career. You do this, save the camp. So he showed, he talks to, basically, Kastner was sitting on one side, giving Becher the words. Becher was conveying it by telephone to Himmler. And then Himmler thought, he said to him, I'll call you back later. Okay, later comes the call. It was already in Hamburg. They returned to Hamburg. And the call comes in and said to him, Becher, do it. So now what happens? This was an incredible precedent. He was going to surrender the camp to the British, who were poised to attack in hours, within hours. Now, he saved British soldiers. He saved German soldiers. He saved the German population there. And we don't know the numbers, but it was at least another 200,000 people. So what he saved are not all Jewish. Then Akas said, I tell the president, you have another 6,000 camps. Do the same thing there. It doesn't make sense for you to sit and defend them and kill more people. When you're going at the same time, you want to make a separate peace with the Allies, and you want to have some goods. It doesn't make any sense. Becher said, you know, you're right. Let me talk to the Reichsminister, to Himmler. And he talked to Himmler. Himmler said, okay, there's only one thing. I want you to go and do it. You go personally. Because one of the things was, because all the camp commanders had orders, written orders from Hitler, to kill everybody in the camp before they surrender, before the camp gets run over.
Right.
So the only way to rescind this, and nobody wanted to do this in writing, go personally to the camps and do it. So here they traveled. Becher, the SS colonel, who was in charge of all the camps. Himmler put him in charge of all the camps. So he goes together with Kastner. He wanted Kastner as a witness to see what he's doing.
Yes.
And talk to all these camp commanders and stop the killing. Stop the killing. Don't do anything to the people anymore. And this was an incredible thing. Then comes the other thing. Then,
Alex, I got about 1 minute left in the program.
Sure. Okay. Then came, of course, there was a ghetto in Warsaw. And that's where Kastner did a job with Wallenberg. Wallenberg was still in Budapest. And he couldn't get into Budapest because the Russians surrounded it already. So but the Germans were still in Budapest. And it was a German general who had orders to kill the ghetto. There was a ghetto with over 100,000 people there.
Wow.
Then Wallenberg went to the German commander and said to him, I have word from upstairs. I can't tell you from where and how. But I tell you this, if you go and fulfill this order by killing everybody in the ghetto, not too long after, you're going to dangle from a gallows. And I wouldn't do this if I were you. And you are an officer. So I think you have a certain honor in you. So don't do it. And the guy said, you know what? You're right. I won't do it.
Well, an amazing story.
Was all part of it. So I think if you add it all up, you're reaching 400, maybe more.
Yes, I said 400,000. Yeah.
It's an incredible thing.
The book is called The Precipice Option. Our guest on the program is Alexander Kaufman. A fascinating story, and we will have him back on a future program. Alex, thank you for joining us and sharing that story. It's a story that needs to be told, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us on the program today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure. You're listening to This Week in America. Information on the book, The Precipice Option, available as well as our website, thisweekinamerica.us.